Sounds good. Let's do it.
Uh, Hello, everybody. My name is Jake McKenzie. I'm the president and CEO of the Intermark Group. And with me here today is Dr. James McFarland, our resident people scientist. He has a PhD in psychology and really has an understanding of how people behave. And today we're going to be talking about seasonal celebrations in the sense of community, kind of the spring, summer stuff. If you're like me, you probably have started on the weekends enjoying some outdoor time, some pool time, some lake time, some beach time, trying to spend time with the family and kids. And if you're watching TV or surfing the internet, you're beginning to see a lot of ads for seasonal events. I've already seen a lot about the 4th of July, a lot about Juneteenth, which is tomorrow, and other events. And it's really spurred a discussion about what do we do with those? How do we take the most advantage of them psychologically from a marketing perspective so that we can affect people's behaviors? One of the lessons we're going to see today is that the seasons affect people psychologically. The events that occur within these seasons affect people psychologically. So the way that we leverage them is actually a little different. So with that in mind, we're going to dive into some content. There we go. And oops. Sorry, let's try that one more time. And once again, I did not share the, the video. Apologies, everybody. I promise I have done this before. And there we go. So introductions over. Tell you a little bit about Intermark. Intermark, of course, is the nation's largest psychology-driven marketing firm. We are headquartered in Birmingham, Alabama, and we are a full-service ad agency. We've got offices in South Florida and Atlanta, and cover everything under the marketing sun. We are privileged to work with some of the coolest, most successful brands in all of America. And what they all have in common is a dedication to really understanding their audiences and then communicating to them using psychological principles to get better outcomes. And as a result, they all have a tendency to outperform their competitors and market share. Now, with that said, we're going to spend a lot more time talking about the psychology of consumers and how they are affected. James, you always do a spectacular job of helping us really understand our target audiences in ways that we don't get. And often I'm nodding along like, yeah, I follow. But as we went through this, you uncovered a number of nuggets that I had never heard before. And so excited to share them today because people genuinely do change psychologically as we enter the spring, summer months. And a lot of the things that occur during those periods, including some of the communal events, celebrations, holidays, changes even further. So I'm super excited for you to share that with the rest of the marketing world today, and we'll dive in. Everybody's trying to figure out how to tie in. Thought we'd spend a moment talking about things to avoid. And it's not just the cliche ads, the cliche social media posts. The 4th of July comes up, inevitably you're going to see, what's your favorite hot dog topping, or what's your favorite picnic edition? It has nothing to do with the brand. It's not going to help you build your audience. But occasionally we see times where people have really stepped in it. You found this one where Cadbury famously does the Easter eggs, had sponsored for many years the National Easter Egg Hunt in Britain. Until a couple of years back, they dropped the word Easter and started calling it the National Egg Hunt. And that did not go over so well. In fact, created a controversy where none had existed before, got crossways with the religious community and the Church of England, and got a lot of negative blowback because they dropped the word Easter from their celebrations. It really stemmed from a poor understanding of what people think about certain holidays. And it turns out no one had been offended prior to that. No one got offended, at least in any numerical way, with the notion of Easter. And so they kind of created their own controversy, sort of like our friends with Bud Light did a few years back, when they kind of created their own controversy by having a poor understanding of what people currently thought. And we've also seen examples from Juneteenth, which is, of course, tomorrow. I'm sure a lot of you will be taking some time off and celebrating, where brands tried to lean into this. It was kind of our newest federal holiday. And there were a lot of ham-fisted efforts to get into this, including some invented products that just slapped Juneteenth on it that went over poorly. And this one from the Children's Museum of Indianapolis, where they had a Juneteenth watermelon salad. which just even saying it out loud grates a little bit and makes you wonder who thought that was a good idea, who could see that out loud and think that this was a notional marketing success in its infancy. And so talking about what not to do is a little bit easier. So it's the cliches and the ham-fisted efforts into it. So let's talk about how we ought to go about it and what are those trends. And it really starts, as all things should, with let's understand our audience. Let's understand what they're thinking, how they're feeling, and how they're processing this so we have a better understanding of how to communicate with them. So James, I'm going to start turning to you to help us with some of this. We'll start with this odd trend that we're probably all familiar with, that we kind of change our fashion sense as the weather warms.
Yeah, exactly. So some of the trends in spring and summer, we spend more money. Maybe don't mean to. Some cases we have to. So in April this year alone, U.S. consumers spent $2.5 billion on clothing and accessories. And they report, they're planning to spend more on outdoor gear, recreation, maybe barbecuing utensils, outdoor furniture, things like that. And so even if we don't really mean to, these changes in the weather just automatically mean changes in wardrobe and activities and things along those same lines.
What I like about this is most everybody gets it. Weather warms up. I look and it's like, oh, I got some ratty shorts. My golf shirts like get a little stained. Let's buy some new stuff. Kids need new stuff. They've grown a little bit, and it spurs. So that doesn't surprise people. It's the reasons why these changes occur that are really insightful, because they have implication for the rest of marketing. It starts with a larger concept of, as we get into a warmer weather period, our behavior changes and our expectations change, including how we relate to other people.
Right, exactly. So this change in weather, even kind of unbeknownst to us, but our motivation increase, our goal setting behavior increase, everything kind of gets amped up to 11. And that includes our emotional connections. We want to do more stuff with our family. We want to feel more connected to our community, our loved ones. We want to get out and do stuff, but we want to do stuff with people that we love and that we like.
An old saying I heard from a philosophy class early on, that we survive winters and thrive summers. And I think that's kind of how people view this as we get into those routines. It's dark all the time during winters. We go to work and we come home and it's dark, and we eat dinner and we go to bed and we rent to repeat. We're almost surviving. Whereas summer rolls around, our expectations change and we want to spend more time engaging with people. Now, that notion of spending more time with families, I want to show a spot here from Old Navy that does a great job of taking this concept, both of clothing as well as familial connections, and breathes life into their own brand using that single insight. You can begin to feel the psychology baked into this spot. Not only are they showing their clothes, they don't spend any time talking about it. There's no copy within this. They're merely showing different family type units experiencing the summer in different ways: movie theaters, beach, lake, boardwalk, and the needs for clothing for all those unique circumstances, in a way to make you feel good, to make you smile and relate to it. And of course, they show a wide range of target audiences within that. Very effective spot in very simple terms, taking that one nugget and breathing life into it. Well done, Old Navy. Another thing that you mentioned that we're beginning to see a lot of during this phase is this notion of self-improvement. Let's get out and do things. That spring cleaning notion of let's reinvent. But you pointed out this isn't something that's been consistent over time. We're seeing something different with a younger generation.
Yeah, research shows that, well, especially among teenagers, like physical activity, formal exercise and working out and this, like, as well as just self-improvement activities, improving one's mind, is increased by 4 times the amount. Oh, let's see, no, double. It's doubled in the last 10 years. Now, this affects all of us, of course, but teenagers are the most affected. It seems like we're finding more things to busy our mind and our bodies with in the summertime. So there's a direct link there where there's an increase in the spring, summer months.
And as a parent, it flies in the face of what you hear from other parents about kids these days. There's too much time on social media and computers, and not as tough and smart, and listen to worse music and all those things. And it turns out they're actually breathing life into things and doing things that are more engaging and focusing on themselves and experiences. And that is going to be a theme of something we're going to talk about today, that notion of more experiences and self-improvement. Now, toward that end, the folks over at Apple did a phenomenal campaign where they took the notion that we all want to do more to improve ourselves during this period, In their case, they tied in this concept of taking walks, and a good walk is anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes. So they developed little audio nuggets that you would download to your watch for your workout and would play. So it's an interview with Dolly Parton, for instance, that lasts 27 minutes that you can listen to. And that's just the perfect length of a walk for you to listen to. Great way to leverage this nugget to do brand building. And it's also a great reminder that brand building is everything. It's not just something you put in a 30-second TV spot. It's every interaction we have with our target audience can be a way to elevate our brand and build those emotional connections. And this leads to what we all know is that we spend more during holiday periods. And talk a little bit about that, James.
Yeah, the National Retail Federation tracks all of the spending throughout the summer, throughout the year, but there is an uptick in spending across all of these spring and summer holidays. So, I mean, Father's Day, Mother's Day, Memorial Day, 4th of July, you name graduations. I mean, people have new outfits to buy. They need to travel somewhere. They need to feed extra people. Whatever it is, there isn't direct relation to how much is spent with each holiday.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's a pretty well-known nugget. People spend more during the summers. The automotive industry explodes during the summers as people have more time to get out and shop for cars, and this feeling of birth and renewal and experiences that we're going to hear a little bit more about. So let's dig in on some of that and see why these changes are occurring. It's not just longer days and more sunlight, although that's certainly a part of it. The overall seasons are having an effect on us. And you've done a tremendous job of taking some of the broad strokes and breaking them down into some interesting psychological nuggets. And I warn our viewers, this isn't all of it. We may have boiled down the list of some of the more interesting, more common ones that we can all relate to. We'll start out with the one that we're probably most familiar with, James, and that's the effect of sunlight on us.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, we're getting out, we're getting more sunshine. The longer days really help. So sunshine is actually exposure to sunlight increases the production of serotonin. It's also known as the happiness hormone or a feel-good chemical. And so it actually regulates our circadian rhythm. We get better night's sleep, our mood improves, we want to spend time with our family. So a lot of these behaviors that we're talking about, they're directly related to the physiological response that comes from just simply getting more sunlight, getting those increases in serotonin.
You know, as I'm sitting here listening to you, I'm thinking I even have more questions, and I probably should have mentioned to our viewers, if you have questions, put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A, because I'm going to make sure we have some time at the end of today, 10 minutes or so for us to answer questions before we wrap. And of course, you're always welcome to send us emails with questions after the fact. Sunlight, major driver. That's probably the one everybody was familiar with. Yeah, we know that it affects us. We know there's seasonal affective disorder. When we don't have sunlight, we get more depressed. Now that it's opening up, it changes. But there's a lot of other subtle things that happen within the spring, summer that change our behavior as well. We'll start with sunlight. This is a good example of an ad that was done by the folks here at Intermark for Parish Medical Center. It was done on photovoltaic paper. So the headline reads, to shed some light on the sun benefits your health, take this ad outside. And when you do and sunlight hits it, it reveals a message. Don't you feel better? So what it's done is it's gotten somebody to move outside to get the message. And we know exposure to sunlight changes your emotional response, generating a positive emotional response and a sense of delight that you've discovered something, the engagement effect, all as a way to build brand affinity for a brand. It's a great way to take that singular nugget and to breathe life into it, to show how you can leverage something as simple as spring to connect emotionally with our target audience. But it's not just the sun, right?
No, there's lots of stuff goes along with these seasonal. So campfires, it's not surprising. We have a long evolutionary history with fire, humans do. And studies on the subject show that fire actually is especially good at social bonding. I don't know if some of our older audience probably remember after 9/11, some of the local TV stations in New York actually broadcast just a picture of a crackling fire in a fireplace and actually helped comfort people. It helped them feel bonded and closer to others. And the studies back that up and show that it's very true. It's a very powerful thing, just this presence of fire. It's also present in rituals and ceremonies throughout human history. Fire has almost been a part of all human rituals and ceremonies and traditions. And so just having their little crackling campfire can be a really strong physiological cue that kind of draws us in and makes us feel connected to people around us.
And I'd certainly resonate with that. I remember some phenomenal times of hanging out with my friends, family around a campfire, and it seemed more meaningful than just sitting in the living room and having those same conversations. Similar to that, we find that sand and the presence of sand has a tremendous effect on our psychology.
Yeah, it's super surprising. Just came across this study just a couple of weeks ago. Sand therapy has been found to be just as effective as cognitive behavioral therapy at reducing anxiety and depression. Now, for those who don't know, CBT or cognitive behavior therapy, it is the gold standard in therapy. I mean, it is the one has the most empirical evidence backing it and stuff, but sand therapy may be just as good for you. Other studies show that simply running your fingers through sand increases feelings of happiness. Or even they blindfold people and have them touch various surfaces. When people touch sand or small glass beads, things like that, they report just feeling happier. They say, oh, that feels like happiness.
Explains a lot about why we all love going to the beach and taking our kids there. And somewhat related to that is this notion of water and how it affects us psychologically. I know when I go to the lake or the beach, immediately I can feel my stress levels coming down. Tell us about why that is.
Yeah. So if fire has a long evolutionary history, water has an even longer one. Uh, Actually, anthropologists suggest that humans are not a land species or a water species. We're an edge species. We've been living alongside the edge of bodies of water for our entire, well, for as long as we know, for the entire human history. It's so we have these very strong associations. Studies show that simply looking at a body of water will actually lower our heart rate, kind of calm our breathing, lower our blood pressure. There's really a lot of good benefits come from just living on the water. Curious enough, the larger the body of the water, the more pronounced the effects. But even something as small as a fish tank,
Oh.
water feature still has there's a significant effect there. So yeah, there's a huge relationship that humans have with water. Yeah.
So we know there are all these elements that occur seasonally that all affect us psychologically, which means that we can use those to generate an emotional response in people. I want to show an example of where the team here at Intermark did that. This is a spot they did for State of Alabama tourism. Now, you may know the state of Alabama has hung their hat on being a spot for relaxation during vacation so that you walk away from vacation feeling relaxed. And you're going to see a lot of these elements within a spot to generate that emotional response to reinforce this concept of relaxation. We'll play the spot in a
Close your eyes now. I want you to relax, breathe deep. Imagine that you were walking on the Gulf shores of Alabama. You hear the birds off in the distance. You see cool waves splash on the shore. You feel the sugar white sand between your toes. Now, let's come back to reality.
I don't want to come back.
You know, most people, when they see the spot for the first time, think, I didn't know Alabama had beaches. And yes, they have some of the most beautiful beaches in the world, but it's a great example of weaving in a lot of these principles, concept, images into a place, each of them designed to generate an emotional response, which is this concept of relaxation and associating it with the state of Alabama. And it's part of a larger comprehensive campaign. And it probably will not surprise you to know that tourism to the state of Alabama is up 75% over a 6-year period, in part because they've been able to convey this concept of relaxation because of psychological elements like this. And of course, being consistent and great creative and good media triggering and all the other things that happen. But I think it's a great example of how to breathe life into some of these seasonal things and using it to build a brand to generate an emotional connection. Of course, a lot of folks are thinking, wait a minute, what about the economy? Are people really going to spend more this season? And so I actually was talking with a gentleman from the Fed yesterday and their view of what's going on with the economy. And he said, your view on the economy depends on where you sit within the economy. The upper 10% of Americans and the near retirement folks are all feeling pretty good. Stock market's done really well. Their nest eggs have grown. They're feeling flush with cash and they're actually spending at an above average rate. And I expected him to say the bottom 10% were stop spending, but that was not what he said. He said instead, they are spending selectively on different things and overspending on experiences, which was kind of a surprise. And so depending on where you sit, you're viewing the world differently. Now, this isn't an economic discussion, but rather it was a point of what unites everybody about that we're leaning into experiences. So let's talk about some of that with a seasonal overlay and start with what we probably all know about impulse purchases.
Yeah, it does seem like spring and summer brings out our impulsive side, and the studies back that up as well. So researchers found that if you're starting, especially with a low ambient temperature, so you're going from lower temperatures to higher that you'd see in the spring, people tend to be just more impulsive in their everyday actions and their behaviors and what they choose to do. And then extend that to retail sales. Actually, retail sales go up when the temperatures go up. They rise in correlation. There's positive correlation there. In another set of studies, they actually experimented with sunlight therapy. So one group got sunlight therapy and another group didn't. And then they offered all of the participants choices. How much would you pay for this item? How much would you pay for this item? And it turned out that the participants who were receiving sunlight therapy, they were willing to pay up to 30% more for the exact same item than the participants who weren't getting the sunlight therapy. Yeah. Oh, another research was looking at stockbrokers. Stockbrokers actually make riskier investments on warmer days. The days when the sun's out and it's nice and warm and shiny, they actually invest in riskier stocks, even though it usually backfires on them. It doesn't work out, but they still keep doing it. It's an ingrained biological response to the sunshine, the warmth, the change in the weather. It brings out behaviors.
Even the most hyper-rational segments of our economy, the professional investors, fall prey to basic human psychology, which is we see the sun, things warm up, we have an optimism effect. And it makes you wonder why more companies aren't leveraging that into their media. Say, hey, we have a warmer day in the spring. Now's a good time to begin promoting products or services that would leverage that effect, something that we have done with clients, but we don't see a lot of. And it's a great way to trigger that and to get better outcomes, to pay attention to things that are affecting our target audience on a macro scale, like the sun and weather. Another thing that happens during the spring is we get this spring cleaning effect. It's time to start fresh and new, and we see it recur over lots of different periods during the spring and summer. You call it the fresh start effect.
Yeah. Yeah. So that throughout our lives, we have even though we don't think it and know it, there's these temporal landmarks. There are demarkers between who we were and who we are going to be or who we want to be. It's a little delineation. And so it occurs like things like graduation, weddings, and celebrations, of course, Mother's Day, Father's Day, 4th of July. Those all kind of little markers in time saying, hey, I can be a new person now. And so this, just knowing that there's a difference between who we were and who we can be, motivates people. It gets us inspired. And then also those are the events that we look back on in our lives that kind of paint this autobiographical memory that we have of ourselves. Those moments, these temporal landmarks, are what makes that up.
You know, we have talked about this a lot with kind of the home goods category. Spring occurs, major life milestones, people kind of reinvent and want to get out and do things. They want to work in the yard, they want to overhaul their house, et cetera. And so you expect the category to spend more within that space. But what we haven't seen as much historically is them leveraging these concepts within their creative. Well, the folks at Lowe's recently had a new spot that did a tremendous job of leveraging this concept within their creative, and I think it's worth a share.
What you be, doing what you do, don't stop being you. No, 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 don't stop. No, I can't lose you, so I don't stop. I'm doing what.
Great example of leveraging this concept of renewal, both in terms of life events, which we've always talked about, but also within seasonal events and using that within the concept itself. Now, you notice there were no price promotions events. It was merely a brand building spot to make you feel good and to remind you that these are the times you want to engage with the brand, which can be very powerful from a memory perspective in generating emotion. And emotional memories dovetail within seasonal traditions. In fact, we have much stronger emotions tied to some of these traditions than perhaps people think about, right, James?
Yeah. If you ask someone, what's your earliest memory and what is it of? oftentimes, people can usually remember back to maybe 3 or 4, something like that, but it's hard to remember everything back then. And then I do this in classes when I teach, and I say, was it a pleasant memory or was it a bad memory? It's always a bad memory. The reason for this is our hippocampus, which lays down long-term memory, it doesn't actually mature until age 5, you're around age 5. And so if you're laying down memories prior to that, you're using your amygdala. Now, amygdala also comes into play when it comes in with these emotional memories, temporal landmarks, graduations, celebrations, weddings. The amygdala is also firing, laying down these long-term memories. And so that makes them more salient, more easily remembered, the more detailed oftentimes, and it makes it more part of who we actually are. In our own mind. And so this is what's happening during these seasonal traditions. These long-term emotional memories are popping up and kind of dictating what we expect to see and what we expect to see going forward.
Yeah. It's a reminder of why I have a stronger memory of laying on the blanket with my kids watching fireworks than I do of the innumerable times we've laid on the couch watching a movie. And it's because of the emotional memory tied to some of these seasonal events as opposed to the relatively mundane experience of just watching TV and how it affects us as consumers. Great example of this within this spot.
Where did you guys meet?
Psychology class.
Maybe we should catch a break.
I'm about to get married.
You're about to get married.
Wow. You look beautiful.
If I had stopped this spot 4 seconds early so you didn't get the logo, would you have known what it was for? Now, Publix does a tremendous job of reminding us very subtly that food plays a role in a lot of these life events, highly emotional life events, but there was no singular product they were promoting. There was no sales event. There was no 30% off soup this weekend or something that used to be cliche within the industry. Rather, this is intended to remind you about life events and how food plays a role and to leverage that emotional connection to build their brand. I think it's a beautiful, well done spot that leverages exactly this concept that you've laid out for us. About how we have such strong, emotionally powerful memories tied to some of these life events, including seasonal events. Another thing that occurs both during this period, but we're also seeing a lot more, is this shift between experiential and material purchases. Now, it used to be when I was younger, people talked about retail therapy. I'm not having a good day. I'm going to go do some retail therapy and shop. But what we now know is that that's not very effective, right, Dr. James?
No, it's not very effective at all. They've been keeping track of people's overall happiness in the US since the 1940s. And over time, even though we've all gotten more stuff, way more stuff than we've ever had before, but our level of happiness has pretty much stayed the same. And that retail therapy, yes, we get a great shot of dopamine and stuff, and we feel good in the moment, but it quickly fades. But experiential purchases or experiences themselves aren't subject to that same fading. We get more oxytocin or vasopressin or some more of the bonding chemicals when we actually go out and do stuff. And so, yeah, 80% of consumers actually say that they're looking for products or experiences that offer deeper, richer rewards.
And we heard that out of the Fed about all segments of the economy. People are still spending, and everybody's uniquely spending on experiences. We're seeing this show up in reporting and data from lots of places, including this report from MassMutual that shows people are focusing on those experiences during the summer. But wait, you may be saying, hey, Jake, I don't sell experiences. I'm not doing travel tourism. How do I tie in? The key here will be illustrating how your product or service ties into a perceived life experience as opposed to just the product itself. And that's a slight evolution from where the industry was 10 years ago, but it's an important distinction that when we're communicating to tie into how it affects people, how it affects an overall experience. A lot of great examples of this. I thought we'd show one or two, and then let's talk about it. I all of us an ad for the Philippines, and the highlight of the ad is the water ferry. I dare say there probably haven't been many other ads that focus on the water ferry, but it really leans into the role and a unique experience. And now we know that's something people are erring towards. And so talking about your product or service within the notion of an overall experience is a great way to illustrate that. And of course, we saw things that we've already talked about, some sun, sand, and water generating those emotional responses, the feelings of relaxation that probably help them overall with a lift. But let's talk about more broadly. How do the rest of us that aren't in travel tourism leverage these concepts to do better content? We're going to cover 4 principles. Number 1 is understanding a landscape and how people are thinking and feeling. Number 2, focus on building connections and a sense of community with your target audience. And that's going to mean a lot of social media content. Number 3, focus on marketing and product development and what this may mean for some things that we can do within the season temporarily to draw attention to ourselves. And then lastly, how do we continue to break cliches? If you've watched our content before, you know we're huge on breaking cliches and doing things that are out of the ordinary, but it's also going to mean being consistent with some of our things from year to year and not just going, hey, what are we doing this 4th of July, but rather having a plan that occurs over a much longer period of time. Let's dive into each of these uniquely and we'll show some examples. We'll start with what is probably the most obvious to all of you. You got to really understand what people are thinking and feeling. And if it's not obvious at the surface, let's dig a little deeper. And that's an area that Intermark believes passionately in, of understanding those target audiences and always going in with the assumption that I don't fully understand what people are thinking and feeling, because people will surprise us. And so it means we got to get beyond the demographics of our target audience into the psychographics. What are they thinking and feeling? How are they processing this 4th of July, this Juneteenth, this spring, this summer, this visit to the beach? And what are they trying to achieve out of it? And only then can we update our information and speak to them in ways that are very meaningful. Number 2, we got to focus on product development and the marketing that occurs seasonally. And what this means is that we can lean into some of these limited time events like the 4th of July, but do so in respectful ways with products that are genuinely tied in with the event. And this doesn't mean that we have to do the cliche of showing the grilling and people flipping hamburgers that's going to blend in with every other ad out there. And at the same time, be culturally sensitive. Now, here's a spot from the folks at Sonic that do an exceptional job of being product focused, limited time offer, but tying into the concept of the 4th of July, but with still finding ways to break cliches.
A message from the Sonic Department of Research and Deliciousment.
Right now, you can get any size of our new groovy fries and groovy sauce for $1. Wait, who would get the small? Okay, that makes no sense. Get any size groovy fry for $1. Live free, eat Sonic.
Got special packaging, red, white, and blue. The notion of live free lets us know they're tying into the 4th of July, but without taking any of the normal cliches around the 4th of July and leaning into it. They got a limited time offer, well thought out promotion that should help build their business at a key time while still following a lot of the rules of what makes great marketing. Well done to the folks at Sonic for building in these concepts. That's helping you see how you can begin to apply some of this. Rule number 3 is about building connections and community. And what this means is that we got to be leaning into social media in different ways. Now, I have a whole speech about best use of social media, and the most advanced form of social media is when the users are generating our content and amplifying our message on our behalf. And once we get there, we know we have succeeded. The question is, how do we do that? And at the same time, highlight the diversity of all the different people that might do business with us in products and services. Well, the holidays are a great time to leverage that. Now, it's not as straightforward as just simply saying, hey, here's something that you can do with our product and service, but rather giving people a construct with which they can interact with your product and service. I'll give you an example of that. So the folks here at Intermark are working with Rita's Italian Ice. If you don't know, Italian Ice is a frozen treat that is made with real fruit and colors your tongue, which is an odd side effect depending on the flavor you eat. So when you're done, you end up with a red tongue or blue tongue or green tongue, and they'd always just had this in the background. Well, they decided to use this as a metaphor for spring because that's when Rita's opens and does the bulk of their business as the weather warms. So they launched a campaign called Suns Out, Tongues Out that simply let people know, hey, tongue gets colored, take a photo, a selfie with the hashtag Suns Out, Tongues Out. That was it. Posters in stores with the bulk of the promotion, and it took off from there and quite frankly exploded. Now, if you go anywhere within the Rita's market, you will be overwhelmed with social content of people showing their colored tongues from eating the product. Taking a seasonal event, tying it to spring, which is a season that they wanted to be uniquely tied with, created a new ritual colored tongues and a selfie of that to create strong affinity with the brand. It's a tremendous way of showing how you give users a construct and then ask them to create content on your behalf. So they gave them the construct and let them run with it. Tremendous job by the team that worked on the Rita's campaign. Really well done. The last principle is to break cliches and go beyond the obvious. Now, Juneteenth is tomorrow. A lot of people are still getting their arms around what do I do with this while being culturally sensitive, but being honest and finding a way to lean into it. And it's perfectly okay to acknowledge that this is going on. I mean, President's Day is a great day for mattress sales. And while that may seem culturally insensitive after a long period of time, it's now the accepted and the norm. But we got to go beyond those major celebrations and beyond the cliches and focus on the shared values within that. What are the values around each of these holidays that we want to convey and carry forward and be representative of our brand and tied to our brand? And the thing that gets omitted the most is be prepared and plan for a long-term commitment. The most successful campaigns are folks that have picked a holiday, picked an event, or created one, and then stuck with it for a really long period of time. One of my favorite examples of this is also one of the least acclaimed, and that's the folks at Hilton partnered with the Florida Keys to do and sponsor an underwater concert. They call it Splash and Rock. It's an underwater music festival that occurs in large part off of the Southern Keys. And they promote it every year and have promoted it for the last several decades. Now, you may be thinking, probably not a lot of hotels down there, and you would be somewhat right. There are more than you think, but it's a great way for them to build a halo around this concept. Don't you want to be going and having experiences? And isn't Hilton the right partner for that? So in helping to build this event, which they helped create and sponsor and make famous, they're building their own brand and creating those emotional connections and conveying to their target audience both how to interact with them, the sort of content that they expect, as well as the role that they can have in these experiences. Now, I realize we have thrown a crazy amount of psychology at you today, and I hope you walk away with at least a few nuggets. The spring and summer periods literally change our psychology. We behave differently. The things that people expect to see and will interact with during spring and summer, such as fire, water, sand, and lots of other variables, all have unique effects on how we think, behave, and feel. We can leverage those to create stronger connections with our customers. And this is important because these key periods will have stronger emotional memories, which is a great way for us to tie in brand building when we do so respectfully. Now, we know this occurs during the spring and summer. It actually occurs during some of the other peak periods of the year, but we have more of them during spring and summer because, hey, we all want to get out and do things. We also know that currently people are leaning more into experiences as opposed to material things. And even if we're selling material things, we need to express how those have a role in people's experiences and how they perceive life, and we'll get better outcomes. And then if we leverage these on a regular basis, give constructs within social media, now we have a platform by which we can take advantage of these seasonal events and get better outcomes for our brands. So a lot within this, a lot of what you've seen before, and I think we showed some great examples of where brands are doing it really well. I'm sure some of you will have questions, and so we are going to pivot and take questions. And so if you would post in the chat or Q&A any questions you may have. The first one that I've gotten that came via text says, where do I start? There's so much here, I think, is the overall concept. Where do I start? And I think at the heart of it, James, I'd love your thoughts on this, is by picking a narrow area, perhaps a holiday that we want to do business around and working backwards. How do I tie in with this holiday? How are people perceiving this holiday, and what is the role within their lives, and what are their expectations? And does my brand or my product, my service, have a unique answer to have a role within this? And if you can't answer yes, then it may be the wrong fit. But if you can answer yes, define broadly, then you can begin to build something around that and connect with people. What would you add to that, Dr. James?
No, you said it really well. Generally speaking, yeah, you want to start broad and then narrow your way down. Oftentimes, it reminds me of there's a study that just came out that showed that if two people are talking, and then you ask if the one person doesn't agree with you, if the other person didn't agree with the first person, then you ask them, why is that? And they said, well, it's because they must not have heard what I said. And that's true. It's a lack of understanding. You need to really start broad and then really drill down to understand the specific individuals, because our life experiences are not easily communicated, well, via text or anything else. Sometimes you have to live them.
Yeah, Well put, well put. I got another question about the targeting implications. I know we talked a little bit about media and how the sun comes out and people's behavior changes. How do we leverage that across time zones, cities, et cetera? Well, we've done this for several clients, and you can actually set triggers that occur down to the zip code level. So you can say when it hits X number of degrees, or when the sun comes out within this space, or when the weather changes in this way, begin running particularly digital media. But we can also do this with broadcasts as well. We can even change the content of creative on the fly based off of what's happening with the weather, so that when the sun comes out, the imagery used within the creative can be changed to be reflective of what that occurs. Technology has brought us a really long way. Media seems to have been one of the slowest areas to catch up, and it's because people have a tendency to do the same thing they had done before and not look for innovations within this space to leverage psychology. In fact, I probably get the most surprise out of some of our clients when we begin talking about the psychology of media and how it plays a strong role in when we talk to people and not just what we say to people. And so I think it's important to remember that media has strong connective tissues with applied psychology as well. So I got a question from Amy. She says, how does a service industry use these concepts? We don't sell products, we sell architectural designs. No, and that's a great example. In fact, I would say there's a huge chunk of America out there that's selling a service of some point, or a service of some sort, rather than a product. And how do we build these in? I would say that a lot of the same principles apply, because we're still dealing with a similar psychology. Let's think about how these concepts tie into people's experiences. So architectural services, I don't know if you're selling commercial or residential. Just because it's an easy answer, I'll talk about residential. Clearly, we can talk about how the architecture of a home will play into people's perceptions within that, how they will tie in with their role of family interactions, how their playtime will be, how their sleep time will be, how their experiences will literally integrate. And being able to show some of that will be more emotionally powerful than just seeing a static image of, isn't this pretty? Because we know from what Dr. James is telling us, that's how we process information. We're looking for, what is the role of this in my life? What emotions does that make me feel? And if I feel that this design, this architecture is going to give me better bonding time with my children, I'll ignore what I think that it looks like, and I'll chase that outcome, because that's what we're looking for. That's what motivates us. So we still really want to understand what our target audiences feel and think, and then use that information to communicate what's important to them. The seasonal stuff is certainly effective, but if you're in, say, the architecture business, it may be less effective. Although we do know some things about the architecture and housing industry. We know people do a lot more home shopping, a lot more thoughts about new construction. They go into renovations a lot more during this period because of some of the psychological effects that we've talked about. Tremendous, tremendous question. And I mostly want to convey same rules apply. You're just going to apply them in slightly different ways. You just got to think broadly around what people are thinking and what they're looking for. Tremendous question. So another question is, any thoughts on scenarios where the holidays are tough? You know, where we've got Mother's Day for folks that may be childless, or Father's Day where someone has lost their father. James, my first thought here is the notion of being respectful. That doesn't mean we don't lean into these common experiences, that we all loved our mothers, that we had great relationship with our fathers, even if that's not universally true. We don't have to build a scenario that truly speaks to literally everyone. You're trying to speak to the core. One thing to note is rarely are people offended when you are speaking to the masses. So even if someone has lost their mother or had a poor relationship with their father, it doesn't mean they're going to be offended because of the spot talks about that notion. And so leaning into the common experiences that we all want to have had, even if we haven't had them, I still think is a great way to resonate with people. Dr. James, what would you add?
Yeah, no, very well said. It's going to resonate regardless, because it is built into our evolutionary history, our biology. There's the exception doesn't necessarily make the rule. I get this a lot in social psychology. On average, in general, is the best answer I can usually give. And so
On
90
average in general, so true.
Yeah, and yeah.
Well put. Well, guys, we are up at our time limit today. I want to thank everybody for their time. We will be sending out a recording of this as well as notes to all the participants, and it will be available for download and rewatch. As always, feel free to send us your questions, email us directly. Love talking about this and how it might apply to your brand and service, because we want you to connect better with your customers. We want you to grow your business, and psychology is the most powerful way to do that. So thanks, everybody. We will be in touch soon, and we will see you on webinar next time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jake.